passage of a bill. My apologies. So just going to talk about the state of play at the minute. Obviously, this is up for change in less than a year's time. Between now and less than a year's time is all we know. This is the House of Representatives. We've got the Speaker there in the middle, a large table. So when documents get tabled, it's as if it's put on the table. Your large U shape, and we've got lots of galleries around. Got the public galleries on the left or right and behind this camera, and then the press gallery there at the back there. The press have offices, so they can have their own entrances and stuff from the back. Then we've got some glass galleries at the top, so school kids can be taken around there, explain what's going on below without interrupting the actual meeting going on below. So that's quite handy. What this looks like is that you have the government on the right of the Speaker. So it's our left, but it's described as right of the Speaker. The opposition there on the left of the Speaker, and the independents and the minor parties in between, kind of sandwiched there. And they're called the crossbench. And the opposition has got its name, not because they're in opposition, but because they are sitting opposite the government. The crossbench are there not because they're cross, they're lovely, happy people most of the time, but because they can cross in between. They can go and vote on one side with the no, or come across to the other side. The aisle is quite significant as well. The aisle, when it's a division and they're counting the votes, is the separation between the ayes to the right of the Speaker generally, the left, the noes to the left. You'll see a little barrier there. So I'm talking about just over, for those playing at home.
Sorry, silly question. So when you say this, there's a vote count, do people actually move around?
Yes, yeah.
But Labor has to vote on party lines.
Yeah, I'll go through that. I'll go through the numbers and stuff. I just wanted to point out this little barrier here that you might be able to see along here, a little fence. That is the official edge of the chamber floor. And similarly, there is also up the very end where the advisors sit. And that means that senators who are not allowed in the House of Representatives can actually come in and watch, because they might want to watch a maiden speech of a colleague, things like that, or a valedictory or something like that. They can come and sit on those chairs, for example. Guests of government will sit on those chairs because they're not elected members of the Australian Parliament. They can't be on the chamber floor, but they can go and sit there. The floor is lava, yeah, for them. The floor is also lava if you are in there and a division is called and you don't want to be counted in a division.
That's why what's he ran from the
room. Yes.
Yeah, he had to physically run because oh god.
I think there was a same-sex vote or something.
It was marriage equality, I think.
Yeah, something like that. There was also one that happened in this parliament, where so usually there's 4 minutes of bell ringing to get people into the chamber to vote. So they're used to this 4-minute time period, and they can kind of take their time if they want to leave. Which, can I just have a little side note of, if you're an elected representative, why are you wasting your opportunity to have a vote and abstain? Anyway, some do. And they wanted to abstain on this particular vote. So they didn't want to. It's also because they can go back to the electorate and go, I didn't vote against that. Yeah, but you didn't vote for it.
You didn't do either.
But it's these weasel words, right? I didn't vote for it, but you voted. You abstained.
I can see very practical reasons why people would be in that position, right? They're a very vocal minority in their electorate, and they don't want to piss them off, and so they abstain rather than voting for or against.
Yeah. But I'd like my representative to take a stand and actually say, I'm doing this because this is the right decision, and explain it to their constituents. Anyway, they're used to these 4-minute time periods, but the Speaker decides that duration, it's 4 minutes if you've got to get from the edge of your office and you haven't been in the chamber for a bit. It's 1 minute if you're already there. And so he said, ring the bells for 1 minute. And they tuned out and they wandered off thinking they've got 4 minutes to get from their seat to the outside. They said, lock the doors. And they closed the doors on them. And they actually physically pushed some of the attendants, pushed one lady into the side of the door. And there was an investigation.
Mhm.
And the next day, a lot of them had to come in and go, you know, sorry, Mr. Speaker, because of yesterday's actions, and had to be like naughty schoolboys explaining their actions from the previous day. So there's a lot of those sorts of interesting mechanics that happen. These are the numbers in the government and the opposition, the independents, and the minor parties at the moment. There can be a little bit of flex there because sometimes people shuffle around. For example, the Nationals had one extra, and now the independents have an extra with, for example, Andrew G moving across. So there is a little bit of flex there, but you can still see here that the government's on 78. For practical purposes, the government's on 77. They provide the speaker who doesn't vote. They can provide a casting vote, but they've got a majority here, and so they're always going to win.
So if it is like bang on the numbers and then they have to provide the speaker and then they're like one vote down, what maneuvering can they do to avoid that? Or
Negotiate.
must they provide the speaker?
So if
Must they provide the speaker?
the government,
Yeah, or can they make someone else so they don't lose that one vote if that's what they need?
yeah. So Slipper
Yes,
Yeah, that's what they do.
with a minority government,
Yeah.
Gillard got Peter Slipper in,
Yeah.
and that took a vote off. But then he became an independent or something. Something it was very
He
messy,
had to become an independent.
right? But it still took that number out of the opposition.
Yeah, I thought they paired them, so if they lose a vote, then the others.
Not in this situation, because pairing is a bit different. Pairing is like, say someone's sick on one side, then the opposition, like say a government member is sick or away for government business, totally legitimate, part of their job, then they'll do a pairing situation so the numbers go down equally. But if you're late and you don't come into the room in time, well, that's your own fault, and they're not going to pair and they're going to take advantage of that. So things like that. Yeah, there's conventions,
Right.
arrangements that will happen, especially like between the whips and things like that.
Yeah, so that's why they have party weeks to round people up.
Yeah. Make sure everyone's there. They have a quota for the room, which I don't have the numbers for the House, but the Senate I've got the quota for, which is a quorum, of 19 senators in the Senate. Interestingly, quorum is often not met. If you look at, like, if you go in there during a sitting day and it's just normal debate, you'll count the numbers and go, this is way below quorum. Quorum doesn't need to be met unless it's brought to the attention of the Speaker or the President. So unless someone goes, quorum, then they ring the bells, and then the people that are on quorum duty have to come in and sit in the chamber and,
Can you do
until
that
they
from the gallery?
Well, you want to get kicked out of hand.
Do that themselves? Does the speaker not do that themselves?
They're not.
Don't have enough people here.
No. So convention says that the Speaker or the President is not really that interested in keeping
They
the
need to be
quorum.
impartial to agree.
Yeah, they need to be impartial anyway.
Mm.
But it's up to the other members or senators to raise
That'd
the
be quite
quorum.
annoying if your representative became the speaker in that case, wouldn't it? Because you want them to represent you and all they're doing is keeping order.
So Mr. Dick had to struggle with this when he was asked to be Speaker. And Mr. Dick, Mr. Milton, Speaker Milton Dick
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you said, Mr. Dick had.
had.
Oh, okay.
And
That's the current speaker.
current Speaker of the House of
I
Representatives.
know, I
Yeah.
didn't know that.
Yeah. So, and from what I understand, he was like, well, how do I do that if I'm now taken out of the ability to stand there and represent my electorate
Mm.
on the floor? So he thought about it from what I understand and then decided he would take the role because he can still advocate for his people behind the scenes. There is a federation chamber, which is an overflow chamber of the House of Representatives. We have a third chamber in Australia. It's not a shock, horror, surprise. It has existed for a little while now. And it's called the Federation Chamber. You can go and watch it live. It's all
What colour is
online.
it?
A light green, kind of an olive.
Same building? In the same building?
Yeah. It's just in kind of part of the committee rooms in the middle there.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's live streamed. You can watch it and you can watch it back, and it's part of Hansard. It's an overflow chamber of the House of Representatives.
What does that mean?
So in the Federation Chamber, the Speaker might go there and use that to put stuff on record,
Mhm.
and because no one's in these rooms all the time. They'll get a deputy speaker in, blah blah blah. So they can still use that opportunity. There's been a couple of times where the speaker has used time to speak on behalf of their electorate, and there's very specific times, but it's very specific about this is something for my electorate, not I'm adding my opinion to the debate. So the House of Representatives, all votes have to happen here. All votes have to happen in the House of Representatives, but the majority of this room is actually empty for most of the time, and most of the time it's about those members getting their opinions on record into Hansard, getting it on the official record. They're not really there debating and trying to convince the other side, because there's 3 people there out of the 55 in the opposition, for example. So they're not really convincing them. It's about them getting their opinions on record, and then they can go to the people of Australia and say, look, here is my opinion. Okay, here is what I said on it.
But I gave my opinion.
Yeah, and here's official record of it too. And that actually comes out in another way with asking for a division. So most of the time, well, all of the times, I think.
Sorry, what's a division?
So most of the time, or all the times, the speaker, when a question is put forward, will say all those that agree say aye, and all those that disagree say no. And if it's pretty clear cut, well, whichever way it goes, the speaker will say, I think the ayes have it, or I think the noes have it. They make a determination.
It's unclear that division.
Yeah, and if there's more than 2 or more members, that are on the side that the speaker declared lost, didn't win, they can say, no, I think our side. So if the speaker goes, I think the ayes have it, and if there's 4 people on the noes, they can say, no, the noes have it. And the speaker goes, well, we've got a difference of opinion here. A division is required. They ring the bells for 4 minutes, usually. That gives people enough time to come into the chamber, and they sit on the right side of the speaker if they're saying yes, and they sit on the left side of the speaker if they're saying no, and they count up the votes. Now, the difference with that is that how each member has voted is now recorded in Hansard. So quite often, the opposition and the government might agree in a position. They're going to vote this particular question down, or they're going to vote it up, whatever the case is. But say some of the independents or the minor parties, the Greens or whoever, are against it. There is no way they're going to win. The numbers are 55 plus 77, in effect, vast majority.
Right.
The government's already
Yeah,
won.
some
They've already,
people have voted a particular way. They have a division.
but they want the division. So they'll call a division, because then the results, how each person voted, is now going to get recorded. If it's a vote on the voices, that's not recorded, which way people voted. And that means the Greens or whoever, the independents, can then say, here, on Hansard, we knew we were going to lose, but we called division. Here's proof. We voted against it. They can go to their electorates and say, we stood up for you. We voted against this. We were swamped, but here's proof.
It's when we were talking about quorum before, that's in terms of debate happening and so on, not actually votes. If there's going to be a vote, it has to be more
than quorum, but not an absolute majority. So I think you'll need quorum. I'd have to check up on. I assume you would. I assume yes, because when the division bells are rung, that's saying quorum is required, and it'll be a vote. On the voices, no, unless quorum is.
If there's only 15 of them actually sitting in the chamber,
there can be 3 voices, and they all say aye, and they move on.
I don't think they could vote.
Which is the majority.
because then if I didn't feel if I wasn't happy with that, I could go to the court and say they didn't have a quorum, so it's not valid.
I don't think they can vote without a quorum.
But I think, well, lots of votes will happen without quorums. But the question is, what is the vote? It might not be a second reading or a third reading of the bill vote. It might be a vote of, do we want to have a break now, or do we want to have a break later? So there's it might have thresholds for legislation votes. So votes quite often occur just to vote of the voices, and there might be 5 people in the chamber.
So basically what you're talking about are procedural votes, yeah?
That might be very different and need that quorum. Yeah, I'm not too sure on the vote and the voices though.
a really naive question, but like, is the job of these dudes not to be in there paying attention and voting? So when they're not in there, are they out like meeting with lobbyists, talking with constituents, blah 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 blah?
Yeah.
There's 2,000 people that are allowed in there apparently. We don't know who they are.
Oh,
So
well,
what is the lobbyist?
Oh yeah.
So like, yeah.
I mean, there's a whole vast. Everyone in here, every senator, every member has their own office,
Yeah.
and in there they're doing work when they're here in Canberra.
so to Jesse's point, if they're mostly not in the chamber and then all of a sudden the bells ring, they're supposed to be able to walk in and know what it's actually about and make an informed vote.
And that's why
There's TVs.
And that's why they have
They've got
staff.
TVs there. They've got stuff. They'll be following along with the day's minutes essentially.
Yeah.
The Senate and the House have live versions and stuff,
But
and they're following
in
along.
practice, a lot of them are just following party lines.
But also like they can have a vote. They can have a vote that says we're changing today's order, and we're now going to introduce this, and then bring in a vote and have a division, and the order's changed up. So they've got to be on the ball.
That's why they have
Slash
staff.
their chief of staff, exactly.
Remember when the Liberals lost control of Parliament?
No.
So it was about, oh God, now I don't know. Anyway, a couple left early and they lost control of the House of Reps for about 2.5 hours.
Yep.
They were going to adjourn, but there wasn't
Yes.
enough people later that said, no, we're going to carry on now.
It was an interesting one because there's an adjournment debate that happens at the end of the day, and it's put forward as a question: do we want to adjourn? And then it's an opportunity. It's not really a question of do we want to adjourn. Really, it's an opportunity for anyone that's got an issue to raise it.
Mm.
So it opens from 7:30 to 8. So there's half an hour where members can just speak. PM. Yep.
7:30 a.m. to 8 p.m.
7:30 p.m. to 8 p.m.
They're still there at 7 o'clock at night.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
That's
start
nothing.
now.
No,
That's-
No, that's what
not
I mean.
all.
Like,
Not all, because
yeah.
obviously it's just whoever wants to be there.
So they're representing
But-
the shit out of them.
But this case that Sam's talking about is
Sometimes.
it used to be a question put, and then all the coalition had left, and the question was still put, and it was negatived. So the adjournment was negatived, and they just resolved not to adjourn, and it's like, well, now what? And they had, and people were heading to the Canberra airport. This is the Thursday afternoon, and they had to race back, and it was,
They're calling people driving back to Sydney and like having to turn around and quickly drive back.
that's changed now. Unfortunately, it's now not an adjournment debate. It's adjournment will happen then, and people can just add things. Yeah, I
It's
know.
just embarrassing
It's a bit of
for
fun.
the government of the day. because
Bit of
it
fun.
meant
And
they
that's what it
couldn't
was.
control the
Yeah.
change.
You
Nothing
can't control.
significant happened, it was just an embarrassment.
We could try and call for a division, like every 5 minutes of the day.
Yeah.
So everyone had to be there.
This is the politicking that they talk about, right?
Right.
So they can. Well, it depends. So members of each party will be on quorum duty,
Okay.
and if it's your day on quorum duty, you've got to be there, and you've got to ready to pounce into the room if quorum's called, and maybe to make these votes.
Okay. So this is already a thing.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
already behaving like children here.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Because it's games. It's well, it's not just it's gamesmanship if you want rather than games, I suppose. But it's about
Adults playing games.
and learning the rules. So the rules that set up the parliament are called standing orders, and that's what they're playing with. They and these whips know their standing orders. How can we get a workaround to do this and all this sort of stuff?
Watch question time, then you'll hear a lot about
Oh,
standing orders and
it's a whole
procedural
debate.
motions and,
Yeah,
all that.
getting
sort of
kicked out,
stuff.
all those bits of business. It's fascinating. I really like
I
this
love
stuff.
it,
It's
Alec. I
so
watch
much
it.
fun to work out how does this happen and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I'll just go to the nuts and bolts of in here. Jesse, you alluded to it before with how it works out with the numbers and voting. So essentially most team members, so party members, are expected to vote as a team. Before they come into the room, they'll have what's called party room meetings. And really, if they want to voice their opposition to what their party's proposing, that's the opportunity for it. They get to, in their private meeting, have a debate and say, no, this is not the direction for Australia. I reckon we should do this other thing, and try and persuade their teammates. And at the end of that, it's up to each team, really. Some are captain's calls, but the theory is that they would vote, and then the party has a unified front and a decision. There is a thing, of course, called crossing the floor. And because these divisions happen by you actually physically standing up and going and sitting on the right or the left side of that aisle, that's where crossing the floor comes into, because you literally cross the floor. Each party deals with that differently, not to do with government or opposition. It's a party decision. And in the Labor Party, if you cross the floor and you vote against your party
Generally.
once, you're out.
Yeah.
You're kicked out of the team.
Labour.
Yep.
Labor,
Okay.
yep.
Yep, you're out.
Okay.
The opposition, they've got a different stance. They say that they're quite happy for anyone to do that. It's, it's broad choice, blah, 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 blah.
Churches.
Bridget Archer did it, I think, 4 or 5 times last year.
Yeah.
She's still in the party.
But
Whether
she's
she
not on the
gets-
front bench, though.
Not on the
Yep,
front bench.
she's definitely not
Well,
expecting a promotion.
So you're referencing the fact that the front bench has essentially more powerful.
They've got
Oh,
the ministerial.
yeah.
privilege.
Yeah,
Yes.
and the literally, it's
Yeah.
literally the backbenchers that you talk about.
Yes.
Is the
Yeah,
backbench just the backbench, or is it like the middle bench as well?
I'll explain.
Okay.
But with Bridget Archer,
Love
it will be very interesting for next year to see if she gets pre-selected.
Mm.
She might not
Oh
get
my
pre-selected,
God,
so that could be
they're not.
interesting.
Yeah, no, they are. They're threatening not to pre-select.
Well, it'll be interesting territory,
Yeah.
right?
Keep
So
it
although-
Independent.
So although they're allowed, there's going to be some strings attached if you
There'll be
don't.
consequences.
By the way, after the division occurs, there is a great line from the Speaker or the President, which basically says, "Please return to your seats."
Mm.
Imagine you crossed the floor and you voted against your team, and now you have to come back and sit next to them, right?
Mm.
Now, of course, this does happen a little bit. Now, sometimes you might go to your leader and say, "Look, in my electorate, my people would be vehemently against me voting with the party on this. Can I get an exemption and go and cross the floor?" If you can explain it, and each party and each leader is going to make up their own mind, they might actually say, "Well, it's best that you abstain." So it's that wriggle room of I didn't vote against it, I didn't vote for it, or whatever with my team, all that sort of stuff. But if you come out of the blue and you cause this big scene, there's going to be ramifications. A conscious vote is a little bit different too, and that again is down to each party. Each party can decide for this particular issue, we're suspending our party rules and we're allowing people to do a conscious vote.
So Labor
Some,
does that sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Yep, they can do that. An example was with the same-sex marriage debate, and that was an easier one as well for a lot of members because they had all this data. They had data from their electorates saying how their electorate voted. So a lot of them could say, "Well, my electorate voted this way. I have my personal opinion, but I'm going to go with my electorate." Some others might walk out of the room even though their electorate was the second highest in Australia.
It wouldn't have been Tony Abbott by any chance, would it?
How do they decide what a conscience, when it needs to be a conscience vote? Because it's all philosophical voting. It's all about like what
Yeah.
your beliefs are. So when
Yeah.
does it become a conscience vote?
And conscious vote doesn't necessarily mean by your conscious. It means you're just not conscience.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean, it just means not tied to the team. And you might take a conscience vote and go, "This is what my electorate wants," rather than what I want in my conscience. That's a party by party decision on bill by bill.
Which things will be.
So
Yep.
Labor might offer a conscience vote to their members, but the Liberals don't. and
Yep.
so
Yep.
Totally up to them. Yep.
Oh, right.
The Greens, I think, for example, did not allow a conscience vote, I think, for same-sex marriage. But I think they were all behind it anyway.
Yeah, surely.
So I think
A
so.
silly question. When you have a division, presumably there are 151 seats.
Hmm.
And if more than half
Yeah.
actually want to vote
Uh-huh.
with the opposition, in other words, they have this,
Sit on each other's lap.
they have
Two things can happen. They squish up, which they're happy to do because in this instance, they're getting more votes. But the boundary is actually extended to the floor. So
So
as long as you're not
you can
behind
avoid
that
that.
barrier,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you're clearly on this side of the aisle,
Yeah.
it'll count.
On the right of the speaker.
On the right of speaker for the
Right,
ayes,
yes.
or the noes for the other side. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. There's lots to unpack there.
This is great.
So hang on. If the eyes are always on the right of the speaker and that's the government side,
Oh, look,
No,
there.
It's
So in
not
other words,
government.
do the,
It's when you're voting, it is just aye and nay. It's not.
Yeah.
Okay, so-
It changes.
they would
No,
Maybe move to
but
the
Frank,
opposite
it's a
side.
great question, right? So say the government are all against something, the current question, and the opposition are all for something. They either have to all get up and move, or
they change
what
the
they
vote.
do is they change the negative the wording.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
We vote that
Make sure
this
that's
bill
the
be
wording.
disagreed to.
Oh.
Ayes, noes. Okay. There is another slight. Okay, you want something technical?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Here we go. The Constitution says for it to pass, for the question that's being in front of the chamber to pass, it needs a majority. Okay. That's 50% plus one. If you think you can only get 50% exactly, but you negative the wording,
Oh, that's different. Yeah.
you only need the 50% to get the outcome that you want.
Oh my god.
Oh, that's.
So if it comes down to that one, which might do in the Senate,
Yeah.
yeah. So you can
That
put
should
it
be-
into the
no,
note.
that's just.
This is the nuts and bolts,
Yeah,
right? This
that's
is what
why
you love.
politics is such fun.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
but that's why it's so bad. That's
Yeah,
why
that's actually-
we
Yeah.
disrespect them because they're playing these games instead
Yeah.
of doing it fairly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of the times when this gameplay happens, the
Constitution
result at the end of the day, if they went through the full proper process, will be the same. Especially in the House,
You literally
right?
said it.
At the end of the day, the government has the numbers in the House.
Yeah.
So you could go through all the games and then call everyone in. At the end of the day, the government's going to win anyway.
Question about the chamber here. So,
Yeah.
The guy on the bottom right in the centre
Yes.
seems to be carved out.
Yes.
Is it because of something special about him?
Yes. Well spotted. You get the lucky door prize or something. I don't.
I'm gonna hit some more nuts later.
Well done. Well done. That's the sergeant at arms. So the sergeant at arms carries the mace in and out.
Okay.
That person is not an elected representative, so I've not coloured him in. He doesn't represent an electorate. He is paid by the parliament, like the clerks, like the Hansard reporters, to help run the meeting, and it's with that ceremonial mace.
Okay.
Jesus, funny.
Do you have a donk anyone with it?
Oh, I didn't.
Emphasis on ceremonial.
Okay.
But it is 7.5 kilograms of silver covered in gold. And the crown on the mace always points to the government side. This is another little fun fact. So we've got the Labor Party here, there's the government on this side. When the mace is fixed, it always points to the right of the speaker. So when Labor came in at the last election, from what I understand, some people that have for the last 9 years been coming into the room and sitting on one side, some Labor Party members were quite gleefully reminding them that no, you're on that side of the room now.
So there's a degree of
That'd be
hot
Tim
desking
Wilson.
that goes on.
They all have their own
Yeah, so
box.
so they all have their own desks. They've got I think they've got nameplates and stuff.
Yeah.
But for a division,
Yeah.
when they're voting, then that's
It's a free
irrelevant.
for all.
You might
So
not
do
want to
people-
leave your laptop and your
Do
notes
people
out
pack
though.
all their stuff up?
Must do, yeah, I guess so.
Here
Here we go. This is the Senate. By the way, Green, House of Representatives, tradition taken from the House of Commons in Britain.